What if I told you that the most dangerous weapon isn't a sword or a gun, but a mind sharpened by the darkest truths of human nature? Picture power as a shadowy labyrinth, twisting, treacherous, and littered with traps designed by the masters of manipulation. Among these masters, Niccolò Machiavelli stands as a grim architect, a puppeteer who pulled strings from behind the curtain of Renaissance politics and left us a blueprint soaked in ruthless cunning. We like to think of power as glory, victory, or honor, clean and shining. But Machiavelli smashes that illusion to pieces with the blunt hammer of reality. His lessons aren't about fairy tale heroism. They are brutal, naked truths about control, deception, and survival in a world where trust is a weapon more lethal than any dagger. This video doesn't offer you warm hugs or moral guidance. It hands you the cold knife of insight, slicing through the sugar-coated stories to expose the raw mechanics of outsmarting your enemies. With every lesson, you'll peer into the abyss of human psychology, meet historical figures whose triumphs and downfalls echo Machiavelli's dark strategies, and uncover how chaos and cruelty often dance together in the theater of power. Prepare yourself to dive headfirst into a twisted carnival of intellect and immorality, where compassion is weakness and silence a sharpest weapon. This is not for the faint-hearted. But if you crave to wield power like a shadow assassin, to see the world as Machiavelli did then stay. Because what follows will unmask the savage art of outsmarting your enemies. In the theater of power, the mask is the ultimate weapon. The unvarnished truth. It's a liability, a neon sign inviting enemies to pounce on your weaknesses. Machiavelli knew this better than anyone. Honesty is the luxury of the powerless. If you want to survive and dominate, you must become a master of disguise, a chameleon who bends reality with a flicker of expression, a carefully spun tale, or a perfectly timed silence. Consider this. Humans are psychologically wired to crave authenticity, to believe that being yourself is a virtue. How naive! In Machiavelli's brutal calculus, being yourself is the equivalent of waving a bloody flag in the battlefield, signaling, "Here I am." Attack history is littered with the corpses of those who dared to be transparent. The truth is rarely straightforward and often deadly. Look to the cunning Florentine ruler, Lorenzo de' Medici. He was no mere prince, but a virtuoso in the dark art of duplicity. Behind his charismatic smile and cultured conversation lay a ruthless strategist who used charm as a dagger. Lorenzo's genius wasn't in overwhelming force, it was in manipulating perception. He understood that power is less about actual strength and more about controlling what others believe about you. His mask was one of benevolence and sophistication, but behind it lurked a mind that could crush enemies with bureaucratic intrigue or subtle sabotage. Or turn your gaze to Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, the ruler of England who turned a kingdom on the brink of collapse into a global power. Her public image was a meticulously crafted stage production. Draped in lavish gowns and pearls, she projected an aura of unassailable virtue, strength, and mystique. Beneath this mask, however, lay a political chess master, willing to manipulate, imprison, and execute to protect her reign. Elizabeth's mask was both armor and weapon. Her enemies never knew if they faced a merciful monarch or a vengeful serpent until it was too late. This is the essence of the mask. It is never simply a disguise, but a calculated performance designed to distort reality for your advantage. And the mask's power lies in ambiguity. Reveal too much, and you expose vulnerabilities. Reveal too little, and suspicion festers. The true mastery is in walking the razor's edge between visibility and invisibility, keeping your enemies guessing, distracted, and vulnerable. The mask is not confined to lies or falsehoods. Deception is an artful blend of silence, half-truths, and theatricality. Sometimes the most potent deception is saying nothing at all, letting your silence weave shadows where your enemies fear to tread. It is about constructing a narrative so compelling that your opponents lose sight of your real intentions. They drown in their own paranoia, misreading your every gesture, while you move freely like a shadow behind their backs. Psychologically, this plays to one of humanity's darkest quirks, our tendency to fill unknown spaces with fear and fantasy. When you control the information flow, you control the story, and by extension control the minds of those around you. It's not about being honest or truthful. It's about being believable. And believe me, the human mind is a playground of gullibility and projection. Yet wielding the mask demands constant vigilance. It is not a one-off costume change, but a lifestyle. Machiavelli's world was a volatile dance of shifting alliances and betrayals. Today's friend could be tomorrow's assassin. To survive, you must adapt your mask to the shifting moods of the crowd and the dangers lurking behind every smile. The mask is your armor against the chaos, and your blade to cut through deceit. But the mask comes at a price. There is a psychological toll in living behind a facade, in constantly suppressing your true self, or rather the self you think you want to be. Yet this cost is trivial compared to the agony of vulnerability, the horror of being stripped bare in the arena of power where only the ruthless thrive. This isn't a call to moral bankruptcy, but a stark reminder that power dances with illusion. Every great leader, every successful strategist knows the weight and utility of the mask. It is how Machiavelli himself survived and thrived in the treacherous courts of Renaissance Italy, a man who hid his ambitions behind diplomacy and rhetoric while plotting survival in the shadows. The lesson here is chilling and simple. Sincerity is a weapon aimed at your own heart. To outsmart your enemies, you must become a master illusionist, knowing when to shine your light and when to plunge into shadow. Your mask should not only hide your flaws, but distort reality, create doubt, and provoke fear. Let your enemies chase ghosts, misunderstand your intentions, and exhaust themselves in paranoia. So next time you face an adversary, ask yourself, what mask am I wearing? Is it a transparent veil of honesty that invites destruction, or a cunning guise that conceals the tiger beneath? Because in the ruthless game of power, the only truth that matters is the one your enemies never see coming. In a world screaming for attention, noise has become the playground of fools. The loudest voices are often the weakest, grasping desperately for validation. Their echo chambers filled with empty boasts and hollow promises. Machiavelli, however, recognized silence not as absence, but as power itself, a dark symphony, where the quietest moves shake the foundations beneath you. Silence is the void that unnerves the blank canvas on which fear and uncertainty paint their ugliest masterpieces. When you refuse to defend yourself, when you resist the primal urge to justify or explain, you create a psychological trap. Your enemies, desperate for answers, begin to unravel their own sanity, filling the vacuum with paranoia and doubt. They become prisoners of their imagination, haunted by shadows of suspicion. Look at the infamous Henry Kissinger, a modern Machiavelli cloaked in diplomacy. His silence was a weapon more devastating than any speech. When accused or confronted, Kissinger rarely engaged directly. Instead, he let silence loom unsettling adversaries who mistook his quiet for weakness, only to be blindsided by calculated strikes behind closed doors. His silence was not ignorance. It was a calculated withdrawal that kept opponents off balance. The ancient Chinese strategist Sun Tzu echoed this wisdom in The Art of War. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Silence is the stealthy ambush, the pause before the strike, the unspoken threat hanging thick in the air. It is the space where your enemy's mind turns traitor, unraveling their confidence. Yet silence isn't passive, it's active control. It is the strategic choice to deny your enemy, the satisfaction of reaction. Defending yourself instantly hands over the narrative, surrendering control to others who now dictate the terms of engagement. When you stay silent, you wield control over what is revealed and what remains hidden, forcing others to chase your shadow. Take the story of the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I, a ruler who often employed silence in his dealings with rivals. By withholding response, he left enemies grasping at straws, unable to discern his intentions. This silence was a weapon that bought time, sapped enemy morale, and preserved his strategic advantage. The roar of a lion is deadly, but the silent stillness before the pounce is what seals the kill. In personal power, struggle's silence functions as a psychological scalpel. Imagine the sting of ignoring a provocateur's insults or refusing to respond to a baseless accusation. That deliberate quiet can be maddening, a slow torture where the aggressor's own frustration becomes their undoing. Silence forces them to expose their weaknesses, make mistakes, or even betray themselves. But beware, wield silence with precision. It's not a cloak for cowardice or avoidance. Silence must be intentional, sharp, and purposeful, a calculated withdrawal, not a retreat. The difference is subtle but seismic. When silence is used as a weapon, it signals strength. When it is mere fear or confusion, it invites contempt. Moreover, silence creates an aura of mystery. People fear what they cannot understand. The less you say, the more they speculate. Speculation breeds myths, and myths breed legends, sometimes elevating you beyond reality, creating a presence that commands respect and caution. This is the dark, twisted psychology of silence. It is both shield and spear, the stillness that unsettles, and the unspoken command that dominates. It's a dance on the edge of invisibility, where your enemies are left stumbling in the dark, grasping for meaning that will never come. In the theater of power, silence is the loudest roar you can make without uttering a single word. It unsettles the mind, disrupts the narrative, and carves space for you to strike unseen. Embrace the quiet. Let your enemies fill the void with their fears while you sharpen your blade in shadows. Betrayal is the serpent coiled beneath the throne of power, the silent venom that flows through the veins of every court council and coalition. It's the bitterest truth Machiavelli dared to reveal. Loyalty is a fragile illusion, and in the merciless theater of power, betrayal is not only inevitable, it is an instrument of survival and domination. If you refuse to learn its dark language, you become the prey, a hapless lamb led to slaughter. Picture this. A circle of trusted allies smiles, gleaming promises exchanged under flickering candlelight. Yet behind those smiles lurks a dagger, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. To cling to sentimental ideas of loyalty in such a world is to wear a target on your back. Machiavelli's cold-eyed pragmatism demands a brutal admission. Expect betrayal, anticipate it, and if possible, own it before it owns you. Cesare Borgia, the Renaissance's original bad boy and Machiavelli's favorite prototype of ruthless cunning, understood this principle with ruthless clarity. His rise to power was a masterpiece of betrayal, cutting loose allies who outlived their usefulness, orchestrating alliances that lasted only as long as they served his ambition, and dispatching rivals with chilling efficiency. Borgia's genius wasn't merely in using betrayal, it was in controlling its timing, framing it as a necessity for survival and power consolidation. Betrayal is above all a matter of control. When you betray first, you seize the initiative, you dictate the terms, the timing, and the fallout. It is the difference between being a victim and being the executioner. Waiting for betrayal is akin to waiting for a noose to tighten around your neck. Those who hesitate or delude themselves with illusions of loyalty are doomed to be caught unaware, their downfall scripted by others. History offers stark lessons in the catastrophic consequences of misplaced trust. Julius Caesar's murder in the Senate is the poster child for the failure to anticipate betrayal. Surrounded by senators whom he believed allies, Caesar was stabbed repeatedly by those who once pledged loyalty. His fatal flaw was complacency, trusting those who would gladly sell their allegiance for power or revenge. Machiavelli's brutal lesson power is a lonely vigil, and the knife can come from the warmest hand. But betrayal is not simply a reactive defense, it is a declaration of dominance. To betray skillfully is to send a message that loyalty is a currency paid at your discretion, that allegiance bends to your will. This act shakes the foundations of your enemy's confidence and ignites fear among their ranks. Chaos spreads, and fear makes for the easiest conquest. The art of betrayal demands surgical precision and psychological finesse. Reckless treachery brands you a pariah, an outcast with no allies and every enemy. The master betrayer cloaks their acts in necessity, justice or mercy, framing it as an unavoidable course correction, rather than naked cruelty. Machiavelli admired those who performed betrayal with the elegance of a surgeon's scalpel, removing the cancer without spilling the blood unnecessarily. Consider the story of Richelieu, the cunning French cardinal who ruled with both piety and poison. He betrayed friends and foes alike, but always under the guise of serving the greater good of France. His betrayals were masked as acts of statecraft shrouded in moral righteousness that baffled critics and pacified the public. This is betrayal elevated to an art form where perception is as important as action. Accepting betrayal as part of the game also hardens the mind. Machiavelli's dark wisdom insists that you prepare for the knife long before it gleams in the shadows. This readiness breeds resilience, the ability to smile when you feel the cold steel at your back and to plan your counterstrike even as you bleed. It is the difference between the king who falls and the king who rises anew from ashes. Betrayal is a mirror reflecting the brutal truth of power dynamics. Trust is a currency, and loyalty is transactional. To survive, you must become comfortable living in that gray zone where friend and foe blur, where alliances shift like sand underfoot. In this merciless landscape, only the ruthless thrive. In daily battles, whether in politics, business, or personal life, betrayal manifests in subtler forms: broken promises, covert sabotage, whispered lies. Recognizing these early signs is your shield, allowing you to strike preemptively or reposition before the blow lands. Machiavelli teaches that the wise don't cling to loyalty. They calculate the value of alliances and the cost of betrayal. Ultimately, betrayal is a dark tool to be wielded with cold precision. It is not an act of cruelty, but a strategic necessity, a weapon sharper than any sword and deadlier than open conflict. Master it, and you command the currents of power itself. Power doesn't just reside in armies or money. It lives and breathes in the stories we tell, the narratives we construct to make sense of the chaos. Machiavelli understood that those who control the narrative control reality itself. The battlefield of power is first fought in the minds of men, where perception molds truth and myths become weapons deadlier than any sword. Imagine the world as a vast theater where every gesture, word, and event is a scene directed by those cunning enough to script it. Those who fail to direct their own narrative become actors in someone else's drama puppets, dancing on strings pulled by rivals and enemies who know how to twist the plot to their advantage. The art of power lies in being the playwright, the director, and the lead actor simultaneously. Take Napoleon Bonaparte, a master storyteller who shaped his rise not merely through conquest, but by carefully crafting his image as a man of destiny. His bullet-ridden cloak, the self-coronation as emperor, each was a calculated narrative move to elevate himself from mere general to legend. He understood that power is as much about inspiring belief as wielding force. His enemies crumbled not just under his armies, but under the crushing weight of his myth. Narrative control works by saturating your environment with the version of reality you want others to believe. Propaganda rumor, selective truth. These are your tools. Machiavelli saw rulers manipulate public opinion like a puppeteer controls marionettes, turning fear into obedience and admiration into fanaticism. The moment you lose control of your story, you surrender power to chaos and dissent. In everyday life, this principle remains brutally relevant. The politician who controls the media narrative can destroy opponents with whispers and insinuations. The CEO who crafts a compelling vision commands markets and minds. Even interpersonal conflicts are often won by those who spin the tale better, painting themselves as victim or hero while casting adversaries as villains. But beware, controlling the narrative is a high-wire act. Overreach and your fabrications unravel. Underplay and you cede ground. Machiavelli warns of the dangers of inconsistency. Your story must be coherent, believable, and relentless. Contradictions are the cracks through which enemies pry and the public turns skeptical. Here lies the cruel irony. Truth is malleable, and reality is a collective illusion shaped by those who shout loudest and persist longest. The Machiavellian strategist embraces this chaos, weaving stories that justify their actions, demonize their enemies, and glorify their power. This isn't deception for deception's sake, it's survival in a world where facts are less important than perception. The psychological edge gained from narrative control is staggering. When your enemies doubt their own memories or beliefs, they become hesitant, second-guessing every move. You gain the initiative simply by rewriting the battlefield in their minds before the first shot is fired. History's darkest regimes understood this too well. From Caesar's Rome to Stalin's USSR, controlling the story was as important as controlling armies. The rewriting of history, the manufacture of heroes and villains, the suppression of dissenting voices, all are tools in the Machiavellian arsenal to maintain power through dominance of perception. So how do you wield this weapon? First, craft your narrative proactively. Don't wait for others to define you. Set the stage early. Plant the seeds of your legend or justification before crises emerge. Second, use selective truth. Ruthlessly, facts that support your story are weapons. Those that don't, distractions to be silenced or spun. Third, saturate your environment with repetition. Rumors become reality when repeated enough. This control extends beyond words. Symbolism, rituals, public gestures, each reinforces your narrative and shapes how you are perceived. Machiavelli admired leaders who understood the power of spectacle, from the imposing architecture of palaces to the intimidating regalia of kingship. Your story must be not only heard, but felt, etched into the collective consciousness. In this game, reality is less a fixed truth and more a fluid canvas. Those who master narrative control paint with broad strokes of fear, hope, and belief to create a reality that bends to their will. The rest, they stumble in the shadows, their stories stolen or twisted, until they become nothing more than whispers, lost to history. Power demands storytelling as savage and precise as any sword fight. If you want to outsmart your enemies, first, outright them, shape their world before they shape yours. Control the narrative, and you control everything. Power is a currency, but unlike money, it isn't spent on comforts or luxuries, it's traded in the marketplace of fear. Machiavelli understood this grim truth. Respect without fear is fragile, and fear without respect is tyrannical and short-lived. The true master of power walks the razor's edge between these extremes, cultivating a presence that unsettles and dominates without needing to shout. Fear is a tool so subtle and savage it seeps into the bones of those who feel it, turning loyalty into trembling obedience. It doesn't require cruelty for cruelty's sake. It demands control over how others perceive you, an aura of unpredictability, severity, and strength that keeps opponents guessing, and allies cautious. Recall Ivan the Terrible, the Russian Tsar whose reign of terror cemented his iron grip on the throne. His unpredictable wrath was legendary one moment, a pious ruler the next, a man who slaughtered his own son in a fit of rage. This cultivated unpredictability was no accident, but a deliberate strategy to keep the nobility and populace alike on edge. Fear became his silent army, an invisible force defending his power more effectively than walls or swords. Fear fuels control by exploiting the darkest corner of human psychology, the primal fight-or-flight instinct. When individuals fear unpredictable consequences, they hesitate, second-guess, and often avoid challenging authority altogether. It is a paralyzing poison that makes rebellion costly and submission seemingly safer. Yet cultivating fear demands finesse. Overdo it, and you become a despised tyrant, alienated and vulnerable to conspiracies. Underdo it, and you invite contempt and disrespect. Machiavelli's counsel was clear. Fear must be carefully balanced with calculated acts of mercy or generosity to prevent revolt and maintain a loyal base. Fear without hope is the fuel of revolution. Fear, tempered with respect, is the forge of lasting power. In modern contexts, fear manifests less in brutality and more in the subtle arts of unpredictability and consequence. The CEO who fires without warning the politician who switches alliances with cold calculation, the leader who shrouds decisions in mystery, all wield fear to maintain control without overt oppression. Fear becomes a psychological barrier that protects power without bloodshed. Remember the chilling silence of dictators who never explain their decisions, leaving their courts and governments in a state of constant anxiety. This silence breeds paranoia, a fertile ground for obedience. When no one knows the line between favor and downfall, everyone scrambles to stay in line. The dark humor of fear is its ability to make the invisible visible. You cannot touch fear, yet its grip is suffocating. It bends wills and crushes spirits more effectively than any chain or cage. Machiavelli knew that fear's true power lies in its intangibility. The less you reveal about your limits and intentions, the greater your power to unsettle. So if you seek to outsmart your enemies, cultivate fear not as a blunt instrument, but as a refined art. Create an aura of unpredictability, wield your power with decisive ruthlessness when needed, and balance it with just enough mercy to prevent the spark of rebellion. Let fear be the silent currency that buys your obedience and deters your challengers. Because in the cruel marketplace of power, fear is the most valuable coin. In the brutal chessboard of power alliances are the pieces you move to checkmate your enemies, but they're never mere friendships or genuine bonds. Machiavelli saw alliances as instruments of convenience, fragile and fluid tools for advancing your own position. To outsmart your enemies, you must become a master tactician, forging partnerships with an eye not on loyalty, but on leverage timing and ruthless calculation. Alliances are not built on trust. They are built on mutual benefit and cold self-interest. History is rife with leaders who elevated allies only to discard them like worn-out shoes when they no longer served a purpose. The lesson: keep your friends close, but your usefulness criteria closer. Consider the diplomatic genius of Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor of Germany. His alliances shifted with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, partnering with Austria-Hungary to isolate France, then realigning to prevent encirclement by enemies. Bismarck's alliances were never about friendship or loyalty, but about manipulating the balance of power to safeguard and expand Prussian dominance. When an alliance no longer served him, he discarded it without hesitation, proving Machiavelli's assertion that the ends justify the ruthless means. The Machiavellian strategist understands that alliances are inherently unstable, always temporary marriages of convenience. Your role is to keep the balance of power fluid enough to prevent any one ally from growing strong enough to betray you while exploiting rivalries and distrust between them. Divide and conquer isn't just a battle tactic. It's a diplomatic philosophy. But beware, mismanaging alliances can be fatal. Blind loyalty to an ally can drag you into conflicts that weaken or ruin you, while neglecting the maintenance of alliances breeds isolation and vulnerability. The key is constant vigilance and a readiness to adjust your strategies as circumstances evolve. Machiavelli warned that the most dangerous enemy is the one you once called friend. History shows how alliances between great powers often dissolve into bitter rivalries. Napoleon's former allies turned against him, and the intricate web of European alliances exploded into the chaos of World War I. To outsmart your enemies, you must anticipate these shifts and prepare to pivot faster than your rivals expect. Strategic alliances also demand psychological acuity, knowing when to flatter, when to threaten, and when to betray. Machiavelli's world was one where diplomacy often masked cold calculation, where smiles hid knives. Your words must seduce, your promises bind, and your actions shock each time to maximize advantage. Even in modern life, from corporate boardrooms to political campaigns, the Machiavellian lesson holds true. Alliances are a currency to be traded, a resource to be managed with ruthless pragmatism. Don't seek friendship. Seek power. In the end, mastering alliances is mastering control over the shifting currents of loyalty and enmity. When you can manipulate friends and foes alike as pawns on your chessboard, you hold the true art of outsmarting your enemies. Chaos is the natural state of human affairs, a roiling storm of fear, ambition, betrayal, and confusion. Most see chaos as a threat, a loss of control that spells disaster. But Machiavelli, the grim oracle of power, revealed its hidden gift. Chaos is the fertile ground where the cunning thrive and the timid perish. To outsmart your enemies, you must learn to not only survive chaos, but to exploit it as your primary weapon. Chaos shatters the predictable order, disorients foes, and blurs lines of loyalty and authority. It dissolves alliances, breaks morale, and disrupts plans. For those clinging to rigid strategies or moral certainties, chaos is a nightmare. For the Machiavellian mind, it is an opportunity, a wild card that, when harnessed, reshapes power dynamics in your favor. Consider the political upheavals of Renaissance Italy, the very crucible in which Machiavelli forged his insights. City-states like Florence, Venice, and Milan were battlegrounds of constant conflict, shifting alliances, and betrayal. Leaders who thrived were those who embraced chaos, like Cesare Borgia, who used unpredictability as a weapon to keep rivals off balance and exploit every fracture in the fragile political fabric. Chaos also functions as a smokescreen, obscuring your true intentions, while your enemies flounder in confusion. When the battlefield is a swirling tempest, those who can see clearly and adapt swiftly hold the upper hand. Machiavelli urged rulers to be like the fox and the lion, combining cunning with strength, deception, with force to navigate and manipulate disorder. The psychological impact of chaos is devastating. It erodes confidence, stokes paranoia, and breeds desperation. Your enemy's mental disarray is your ally. By fostering or intensifying chaos through misinformation, sudden moves, or calculated provocations, you force them into reactive modes, stripping them of strategic initiative. But chaos is a double-edged sword. Mismanage it, and you risk self-destruction. The key is controlled chaos, instigating enough disorder to unbalance your foes while maintaining a firm grip on your own forces and narrative. This requires ruthless discipline, masked beneath a veneer of unpredictability. In the modern world, chaos takes new forms: rapid information flows, social media storms, economic shocks. Savvy power players exploit these to disrupt opponents, manipulate public opinion, and advance their agendas, while others scramble to catch up. The Machiavellian strategist sees chaos not as a setback, but as a battlefield advantage, a strategic tool in the arsenal. Embrace the storm. Dance in the whirlwind. Let your enemies drown in confusion while you carve your path through the chaos unstoppable and untraceable. Power's darkest lesson is that mercy, guilt, and conscience are luxuries reserved for the weak and the naive. Machiavelli doesn't mince words. If you want to outsmart your enemies and seize lasting control, you must silence the moral voice that chains your ambition and clouds your judgment. To be ruthless is to accept that ethics are tools wielded by the powerless, while the strong shape morality to serve their ends. History's greatest tyrants and strategists understood this unspoken pact. They knew that hesitation born of compassion invites defeat, and that mercy often becomes a weapon turned against its wielder. Machiavelli's grim counsel: if cruelty must be employed, it should be swift, calculated, and done all at once to secure order and prevent future unrest. Hesitation, apologizing, or half measures are the marks of weakness that embolden enemies. Consider the chilling reign of Catherine de' Medici, who ruled France through calculated cruelty masked as political necessity. Her ruthless suppression of the Huguenots, culminating in the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, was an act that stained history, but it was also a brutal strategy to consolidate power amid civil strife. She silenced her conscience, choosing the cold arithmetic of power over sentimental mercy, and the consequences echoed through generations. Ruthlessness demands not only brutal action, but the internal fortitude to live with the aftermath. It means mastering a psyche hardened against regret, guilt, and doubt. This psychological armor enables you to act decisively when others hesitate, to embrace the darkness that others fear. It is a lonely path where empathy is sacrificed at the altar of control. Modern leaders who cling to idealism often fall victim to this truth. They attempt to balance kindness with power, only to be outmaneuvered by colder, more pragmatic rivals. The Machiavellian strategist knows that power is a game of survival, not virtue, and that the moral high ground is a precarious perch easily toppled. Yet ruthlessness doesn't mean mindless cruelty. It is discipline, the ability to deploy harshness with precision and purpose. It is a dark art of timing, of knowing when to strike and when to withhold. It is the brutal calculus of political survival, where every decision is weighed against the cold ledger of consequences. Silencing your conscience means embracing the uncomfortable truths that power corrupts, that human nature is selfish and fickle, and that the path to dominance is paved with sacrifice, not just of others, but of your own illusions. If you wish to outsmart your enemies, prepare to silence the inner voice that whispers of mercy and justice. Only then can you wield power without hesitation, without remorse, and with the relentless focus Machiavelli demands. We have wandered through the shadowed corridors of power, where deception is a shield, silence, a roar, and betrayal a tool sharper than any blade. Machiavelli's lessons strip away the comforting myths of honor and loyalty to reveal the raw, unforgiving mechanics of human nature and control. To outsmart your enemies is not to play fair, but to master the dark dance of strategy, where every move is calculated, every word weaponized, and every alliance temporary. You have seen why wearing a mask is essential, why silence unsettles more than noise, and why betrayal is a currency of survival. We explored the ruthless cultivation of fear, the power of narrative control, and the explosive advantage hidden in chaos. Above all, we confronted the uncomfortable truth that to wield power effectively, you must silence the conscience that chains ambition and clouds judgment. This is no guide for the faint-hearted or the morally rigid. It is a call to embrace the uncomfortable, to peer into the abyss of power with open eyes, and to emerge not broken, but armed. Machiavelli's darkest lessons are not prescriptions for evil, but for survival and supremacy in a world where kindness is exploited and weakness devoured. So what will you do with these truths? Will you cling to naive ideals and watch as others outmaneuver you? Or will you step into the shadows, mastering the ruthless art of outsmarting your enemies and carving your place among the architects of power? If these lessons resonate with you, don't hesitate, like, subscribe, and join this journey through the darkest depths of strategy and control. Share your thoughts below. Which ruthless tactic will you wield first? Power rewards the bold. Will you dare?